Well, hey everyone, welcome to Beam and Board. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about a coffee bar build that I recently did, and I just want to share a few lessons that I learned throughout that build. Now, the first lesson is probably the biggest one I learned on this, something I didn't entirely expect to happen, and it has to do with the top. So the customer requested that the top on this be a pine top that's been torched. This is a very common method. You see it in a lot of DIY settings, and it looks really awesome when it's done. The issue is this top is 12 inches wide, that's been glued up out of 4 pieces, and when I torched it, it warped. Now, anytime you introduce heat to wood, you can expect that board to warp. And I did expect this to happen. I didn't expect it to be as bad as it was. Fortunately, I was able to salvage it without remaking the board. And really what it took was just a little bit of moisture on the back side of the board and some heavy clamping with some really flat pieces to clamp it together. And I was able to get that board straightened back out. It took time, about 3 days in the clamps, for it to straighten out to be usable. But this is just one example of the things that you can run into as a woodworker. If you build furniture, you're going to run into things that you have to correct and have to address. Now, the second lesson, this is really more of a tip. This is something I knew from the start. Don't cheap out. One, don't cheap out on materials. Two, don't cheap out on stuff like hardware. The hardware that I used for the barn door on this was a relatively expensive hardware set. I saw plenty of $15 and $20 barn wood hardware sets out on Amazon, but that's not the route I wanted to go with this. I wanted to use something that's quality. Now, I did use an Amazon set, but after spending some time and researching the company that made this particular set, I realized that I was going to be getting some quality hardware for this build, something that really represented what I want to send out of the shop. Now, the third lesson on this is something that I've come to realize over the years. Cutting and assembly often can be a really fast part of the build, and it can feel like you've made a ton of progress really fast. And then you get to the sanding and the finishing, and that's where the mundane work starts. And on this build, it felt like I was never going to finish painting this thing. But one trick that I have in my shop is I have a TV mounted on my wall, and I play movies and videos, music, whatever I'm in the mood for, and that's usually always going in the background of my shop. So when I do something like this, I'll throw a 2-hour movie on, and it helps me get through the painting and finishing part. Now, the final lesson that I pulled out of this project is the importance of front-end planning. So one thing I did with this particular build is I spent a few hours on the front end putting a plan together. I talked with the customer. We talked about dimensions. We talked about materials. I even drafted up a couple images using an AI software just to help show the customer what the plan was and to help give me a visualization of what I was going to build. And from there, I put all that information on paper and I drew out a plan. How is this going to be assembled? What is the joinery going to look like? What is the dimensions and shape of the top? How am I going to round over the top? These are all things that need to be planned on the front end. Hardware selection, all of that needs to go in. So I viewed the images that were provided of the hardware that showed the dimensions and the offsets. All of that goes into the planning phase on the front end because this is a one-off piece. This isn't something that I had plans for, that I purchased plans for. This is something that I came up with based on an image that was shared with the customer. And from there, I put a plan together that I could put in place and carry out here in the shop and get this done right the first time. So that's the 4 takeaways that I really had from this project. I hope you enjoyed this build. If you haven't watched the video of it and you want to see the full build, I've got a link to that video down in the description. And if you like this build and you want to see other builds like it, consider subscribing, and I'll be sharing some more of the stuff that comes out of this shop in the future. And as always, I'll see you on the next build.